Alright, so this is the Coral Reef Protection Bill by me and Nikolai. Okay, so some present threats to the coral reef right now is like a destructive fishing, like cyanide fishing. And basically what it does is the cyanide paralyzes the fish and it makes them easier to catch. And like dynamite, when it explodes in the water, the sonic rupture from the explosion ends up killing the fish. And then there's bottom trawling, which is actually one of the greatest threats to cold water coral reefs. Then there's overfishing, like the Japanese economy essentially has a reliance on fishing, and over thousands of restaurants in Asia are dedicated to fish dishes alone. And we have careless tourism like scuba diving and fishing, like deep sea fishing, even though the coral reefs aren't mainly there. They stir up sediment and collect coral for souvenirs to take back home. And then there's pollution such as urban and industrial waste being dumped into oceans, as like frequent oil spills from like Exxon and BP. And there's also runoff from nearby farms such as Japan with the rice farms. It increases the level of nitrogen, which in the seawater, which causes an overgrowth of algae, which smothers reefs by cutting off their sunlight source, which prevents them from doing photosynthesis.
Yeah. Common life in coral reef and the human impact. Sponges and sea squirts are among the life in the coral reefs, as well as sea worms, crustaceans, mollusks, sharks, rays, turtles, and specifically coral reef fishes like trigger and hawkfishes. We can benefit off the coral reefs economically with tourist attractions, as well as potential medical resources and food like fish and protection for coastal cities and beaches. New studies have shown that the coral reef can hold potential cures for some cancers, arthritis, and Alzheimer's disease and other diseases.
Alright, so talk about a little bit about the problems with the coral reefs. And one of the main dangers is the increase in acidity level. That's called the ocean acidification. And that basically like turns like the bright colors of the coral off, makes it kind of bleaches it and kills off the reefs, which kills off the habitat and ecosystem for thousands of different fish species. And this happens through the excess carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And so a potential long-term solution, one of the two potential solutions within this bill, is that the country would put a little bit more debt in, since companies wouldn't have the resources, would be for the nation to set aside more land reserves, because the burning of trees and mass deforestation increases the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which increases the acidity in the ocean. It's going to put a few more billion in the national debt and maybe lower the economy by a couple of percent, probably 2.75% at the first few years. But when the national debt's in the 17 trillions of dollars, the country can handle it. And then we can also encourage neighbors like South America with the Amazon rainforest to slow down, because we have companies in South America right now that are cutting down trees and whatnot. And about right now, the average number is 17 metric tons per capita for the U.S. alone. So that's one problem, one potential solution. And then so the real plan and the bill proposed for Congress is that, along with the deforestation section, is that a small fund of the national budget would be set aside to encourage first, like an American diet, to eat at a lower trophic level, because right now studies show that it takes about a gallon of gas to produce a pound of meat, and also takes 2,500 gallons of water to produce that same pound of meat, when in reality you could just produce 100 pounds of wheat, which as cows now release a lot of methane, which will increase the temperature, climate change, heat up the ocean waters and kill off the coral. And then also, because you're using less land, you'll have more trees, the carbon dioxide levels will go down, which will slow down the ocean acidification, and that'll also help the coral. And then so essentially, The plan is to start taxing at an exponential rate. The top 10 companies that pollute through fossil fuels like BP and Exxon, which I mentioned earlier with oil spills. And essentially it's the top 10. It's an exponential tax because the top 3 to 4 have the most pollution, and right around you get to the 5 or 6 company with fossil fuels, their amount of pollution really drops off, so they don't need to be taxed as much. So about the first 3 companies, it's closer to 4% of a tax. Over down to the 10 company, it's around to 1.5% tax. And it's estimated the first year it would get around $100 million. And so 10% of the fund would go to the health campaign to promote a lower trophic level diet, to lower the methane in the air, to slow down climate change, and to decrease the carbon dioxide levels. And then the rest of the 90% of the fund, so $90 million the first year, would be to employ more research facilities to start researching renewable energy sources, because you have to replace those companies that are taxing us, or that we're taxing, and like solar and wind. And then within 25 years, it's projected that you can have a few facilities starting to replace these big companies like BP and Exxon. And the only real downside is that it could raise gasoline prices at an additional 10 to 15 cents since you're taxing them. But because in the bill proposed, it says that the tax won't begin to actually be collected until April 15th, 2018, which gives the companies a year and a half to increase regulations, lower pollution, so not as much money is collected from them. So that should lessen the impact on the energy economy, and because you're replacing them with renewable energy sources, you're creating jobs, and you're also replacing them instead of just taking away the fossil fuel companies. And then, so between the two solutions of just the land reserves and the pollution fund, where you have 10% going to a health campaign and 90% going to renewable energy sources, the pollution fund would form the CRPS, which is the Coral Reef Protection Society, and that would be a lot more effective since we're basically fixing 200 years of ocean acidification, and because America is one of the most influential countries, you probably invest a lot more and probably start proposing toward the UN, which has 193 countries right now. And I think it'll really have a positive effect on the U.S. And there are all my sources.